One of the biggest games of the weekend is Ohio State at Michigan. Big time playoff implications on the line, and also a rivalry game that has surprisingly been one sided as of recently. Ohio State is looking to get the Michigan monkey off their back, and Ryan Day is looking to beat the Wolverines and kind of put those concerns to bed. They're kind of been a team that has given Ohio State a ton of trouble, and Ohio State just beats everyone except Michigan. I don't know why that is and why that is the case with Ryan Day, but he's looking to move on from that. And last year, it created a ton of controversy. There were people that were asking Ryan Day to be fired after the Michigan game. And then Ohio State won the national championship. So that kind of eased some of those concerns as well as this year. But that was a game that was very concerning for Ryan Day. And it almost put him in a position where he had to win a national championship for people to kind of forget about that. And I don't think they've forgotten, but also I think they're less upset about it because of what he did. You look at this year, Ohio State's 11-0. They're playing with a ton of confidence. Their quarterback has developed. They're playing a Michigan team that doesn't look as good as they've looked in the past. Things are going well for Ryan Day, and they've been able to win plenty of games. And I think it kind of does help that they've had the schedule that has been their 2025 schedule. But at the same time, you got to win the games that are on your schedule. You can't dictate what happens once the schedule is set. And they've basically just done that. They have taken their game to a level that it needs to be. And now they're ramping things up even more for the playoff. Now, Julian Sayin has been the big X factor of this offense. And we knew that coming into the year. Will Howard's departure meant it was Julian Sayin's job. And even though there was, quote unquote, a quarterback battle, it was Julian Sayin's job. And it's clear that he is the best option on this team. He's also developed so much as a passer, as a quarterback throughout the year. I think when you look at early in the year, the Texas game right out the bat, Julian Sayin didn't look great. It wasn't his best performance. It wasn't his best game. But also, Ohio State was kind of learning what he could do. Ryan Day and Brian Hartline, the offensive coordinator, were trying to figure out, what does he do well? What can he handle? What is he not ready for? And early in the season, you saw glimpses of what he could do. You also saw him maybe not ready for certain things. But as the season progressed, you've seen his confidence skyrocket. Now, any quarterback would have confidence when you get to throw to Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Now, their status for this game is going to be something to pay attention to. Do I expect them to play? Yes. However, they have been out. Tate's been out for a couple of weeks. Jeremiah Smith did not play last week. Not that he needed him, but that is something to keep an eye on. Are they 100%? And are they going to be able to handle the intensity of this game? I think yes. I mean, Jeremiah Smith's just a physical specimen that's tough to stop for anybody. So I'm not worried about that. Carnell Tate coming back would be huge as well. This is a passing attack that runs through those two guys. And unfortunately for a lot of defenses, they barely have enough guys to cover one of them, let alone two, which also opens up opportunities for Max Clare, Brandon Innes. It also gives the rushing attack a lot easier time. You can make an argument that the reason why Bo Jackson, James Peoples, CJ Donaldson have had the success they've had this year is because the passing attack commands so much of the attention. People are so worried about stopping Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate that they're giving Ohio State light boxes. And I think part of that is true, but Jackson, Peoples, and Donaldson are so talented that they'd be fine even if teams didn't have to worry about that as much. This has been such a good offense and such a fun offense to watch that I don't have a ton of concerns even facing Michigan. Now, the defense has been a different story in a way, but also similar. We had questions about Ohio State's defense coming into this year. We had concerns about what this defense could do. The front line was going to be a big question. The talent that they lost left some big time vacancies. But I think there were people who believed in this group and thought that this group could be just as good, if not better. And while everybody is looking at Arvell Reese and gushing over him as an NFL draft prospect, guys like Caden Curry, Caden McDonald have stepped up in a big way. Caden Curry leads the team with 13.5 tackles for loss and 9 sacks. he is someone that has elevated his game probably the most of anybody on this defense. There weren't a ton of people talking about Caden Curry coming into the year. We were talking about Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs, and while those guys have played really well, it's been the defensive line that I think has stepped their game up the most to be able to help this defense. Now, the linebacker group, Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese, have been tremendous. They've been so good for this defense. Caleb Downs has been good as well. So this defense has lived up to the hype. They've lived up to expectations, and it's a big reason why Michigan is going to have some potential issues. Bryce Underwood is going to have to figure out how to stay poised in the pocket against a really good team. He's done that so far this year. And if there's one thing that he can take from his previous experience to now is the Oklahoma game. Oklahoma's defense is about as close to the Ohio State defense as he was going to get, and he did a great job of staying poised, making the right decisions, and making plays. Now, it wasn't his best performance, but it wasn't because he was scared or worried or rattled. That is going to be a huge thing that he can bring to this game because the intensity is going to be high. Ohio State is going to try and rattle him as much as possible, and how he handles that pressure is going to dictate the outcome. Now, he's going to be without Justice Haynes, which really hurts. I think that affects this offense a lot, and we've seen that. Jordan Marshall's also been dealing with an injury, so that doesn't help either. Bryce Underwood is under a lot of pressure, and a nice thing for him is that Andrew Marsh has stepped up in a big way. 641 yards and 3 touchdowns. Donovan McCulley has shown flashes at times as well. So they need those two guys to play even better than they're already playing. They need Bryce Underwood to honestly take a step. I think he has a bright future, but I also think that they need him to take a step if they're going to win this game. The biggest question, though, I think, outside of Bryce Underwood is this defense. What are they going to do to slow down this offense? Stopping Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate is not something that anybody's really been able to do besides Texas. So how do they take elements from that Texas game and utilize it in their game plan? That's going to be a big question. The defensive backfield is in for a long day, regardless of how much success they have. If they find a way to slow down Smith and Tate, they're still going to have a long day because those guys are first round picks, because those guys are so talented. It does not matter if you're successful or struggling. It's going to take an all out effort from this secondary to be able to slow them down. Now, how can this group be helped? Disruptive plays. Guys like Derek Moore have been disruptive. Jayshawn Barham, we've seen them be disruptive and ruin things for opposing offenses. And if there's a group that you can attack that is a weakness of this Ohio State team, it's the offensive line. And if Michigan is going to pull off this upset, they need to dominate the line of scrimmage. They need to dominate and make sure that Julian Sayin is not comfortable. Sayin's size can be kind of brought into play if you're able to close the pocket, collapse the pocket, and get to him where he can't have effective throwing lanes. If he can't get the ball out quick, that's going to be a big way for Michigan to get the momentum in their favor and potentially pull off a stunner. This is going to be a fun game. The past obviously doesn't affect this game, but it does bring storylines into this. And if Michigan is able to pull off a stunner here, it's going to be something we talk about for a while. Because this Michigan team, I think, has some concerns, but they're also 9-2. I think people kind of forget about that a little bit. Bryce Underwood has to play well. The defense has to find a way to slow down this Ohio State offense. That being said, I'm going to pick Ohio State to win this game. I think that Michigan does cover because this is just a rivalry game that has always seemed to be close when you expect it to potentially be a blowout. I do think Ohio State wins. They remain undefeated, but I'm very excited for how this one is going to play out.